Hello, and welcome to a new video. In this video I'm going to explain the extended lore of Five Nights at Freddy's that the Fazbear Frights books have revealed. This is a sort of continuation of my other lore video, go check it out. This goes by the idea of the Fazbear Frights books being canon to the games, which is implied anyway even by the new book series, Tales from the Pizzaplex. After the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place from the 6th game burned down, William Afton's corpse was found and brought to a hospital. People didn't know how was he even alive in those conditions. Some who worked in that hospital tried to end his sufferings, but they couldn't. They thought that an evil presence was doing all of that because a shadow of a child with a crocodile mask kept appearing every time they tried to kill him. Afton was also having horrible nightmares and was afraid of even hearing the word hell. The nightmares were the ultimate custom night, and the one who was tormenting him was the one he shouldn't have killed, who was a child named Andrew. William Afton spells out with his hand that he wants to go to the Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center. The man is put in a wheelchair and they bring him to the distribution center. When they're inside, the man starts to violently convulse, spewing blood and tissue before collapsing. The man begins barfing, and then he explodes, spraying black blood and a tar-like substance everywhere. His remains fall out of the wheelchair and they hear something running towards the shelving area, and they find a trail of small footprints engraved in the man's blood and fluids. Both Andrew and William infected the objects in the center, but mainly a dog animatronic named Fetch, the antagonist of the first story of the second book. Meanwhile, a child named Jake has a brain tumor that he is fighting for 3 years already. His dad made a doll for him called Simon who became Jake's friend, but it was actually just his dad speaking through it. The situation gets worse and Jake dies, and Simon is nowhere to be found. Phineas Taggart, a retired scientist, now studies the power of human emotions. He hypothesizes how emotions are more powerful than any sort of physical matter, and can have a direct impact on inanimate objects depending on what emotion is thrown at them, thus explaining the concept of haunted objects. He was particularly focused on agony, the emotion he considered the most powerful of them all. He found Fetch and Simon. During one of his experiments, Phineas inserted the battery pack of Fetch into an animatronic endoskeleton. He also puts the head of the Simon doll onto the head of the endoskeleton. The endoskeleton comes to life and kills Phineas in cold blood. The police are called and it's presumed Phineas was electrocuted to death by his own equipment. Some of his belongings are eventually packed up, including the endoskeleton. The mysterious being awakens, putting on an old trench coat as the truck drives away. The endoskeleton is currently possessed by two boys, Jake and Andrew. Jake has control over the endoskeleton's sight and movement, while Andrew can only listen in. Both boys have foggy memories, but Andrew can recall wanting to get back at someone who hurt him. He had attached his soul to the man to ensure he never died, even when several people tried to kill him. Jake accidentally killed a man when he touched him when they were escaping. His skin turned pale and his eyes bleed black as he died. Andrew explains that his anger was affecting the endoskeleton and zapping anyone it touched, with the zap being capable of killing people. Andrew also reveals that a number of items were infected by that anger. Jake theorizes that there may be a third entity within the endoskeleton, a hitchhiker, which is causing the infection. Jake is able to telepathically connect to Andrew's thoughts, so that he can track down all the infected items. People started seeing them going around collecting stuff and called the creature the Stitchwraith. A detective named Larson was sent to investigate on this case. The objects were mostly parts of the antagonists of most of the Fazbear Frights stories, like a strange plush trap chaser and a strange doll-looking animatronic with a long neck. Larson investigates in Phineas' laboratory. After connecting the dots, Larson concludes that the Stitchwraith is connected to Fetch, who was connected to Fazbear Entertainment, where several murders had taken place. He then decides to search for more evidence to confirm his suspicions. The Stitchwraith brings all the items in a warehouse where there is a large garbage compactor. Larson finds them and points his gun to the creature. Andrew tries to take control and to kill him, but Jake doesn't want to kill an innocent person, so he tries to stop Andrew. Jake activates the garbage compactor with all the items inside of it and jumps inside. Something really bad happens. While the two souls try to help each other, a strange colorful blob appears and attacks Andrew. The entity then takes the form of a skeletal man with pointy rabbit ears. It's William Afton. Andrew gets released from the Stitchwraith, leaving only Jake. Afton uses all the infected objects and fuses with them, becoming a 15 feet tall monster. The Stitchwraith comes out from the compactor, But it's not the only one. The doll-looking animatronic with the long neck goes to him and pins him to the ground and starts to absorb Afton's agony that was left in the Stitchwraith. Then she goes to merge with the Amalgamation. Larson gets attacked by Afton and gets stabbed with a metal part, but despite the wound he goes outside. He hears a voice from the Stitchwraith's bag. It's what remains of the puppet's mask. The Stitchwraith was often seen at the fire site, and that's how they found it. The voice tells him to bring it to Afton. Larson uses a forklift to pierce through Afton and push him towards a lake. The puppet comes to life and escapes the bag, as the mask and some newly formed limbs go inside of Afton's Amalgamation. The doll-looking animatronic escapes from the Amalgamation, while the puppet defeats Afton from the inside. The monster then collapses in the lake. Jake realized that Larson had been infected by Afton when he stabbed him, so he channels all of his energy from Fetch's battery pack into one of his arms and heats it up to the point where it shines. Jake takes his warm hand and burns away Afton's infection, also burning away some of Larson's flesh in the process. Jake hears police sirens, and leaves Larson to be rescued. Larson wakes up in a hospital. He's been having visions from different places and different times from different people. But, he always saw the same thing when transitioning between each memory, a ball pit. He begins to search for the ball pit because he felt it was connected to all the other mysteries, and wonders if the Stitchwraith is actually good and not evil. Days after the incident with Afton, Jake is all alone. He finds a homeless man and accidentally touches him, but this time he doesn't die. Instead he sees his memories and finds out he can change them into happy ones. Jake then finds a girl and saves her from some men who were threatening her and decides to take care of her. Larson searches for potential places that might contain the ball pit and finally comes across an old, abandoned restaurant. The restaurant is bare and empty. He cautiously enters the ball pit and found it was similar to his visions. He discovers old blood and takes samples of it before leaving. Larson found 30 samples worth of blood in the ball pit. Larson receives the results of the blood samples which were tested in the lab. All 30 samples came from one person, with each sample coming from a different year. Larson deduces that something has been bleeding inside the ball pit for over 3 decades, and is determined to find the source. He suspects that it may tie back to the Stitchwraith and the weirdness surrounding it. Larson plans to learn once and for all whether the Stitchwraith is good or evil. The girl Jake has saved is called Renelle, and she tells him about her past and how she wants to reunite with her father. Jake notices that she's wearing a silver pendant in the shape of a heart. Larson discovers that while all the blood samples came from the same blood, the date of origin for each blood sample usually coincided with the disappearance of a teenager. Parents often reported that their teenager saw an animatronic with a female body and a pale face with clown makeup before disappearing. While looking through pictures of missing teenagers, he spots the animatronic behind one of them, wearing a heart-shaped pendant. Larson noticed another connection between the incidents while looking through the files. A man named Dr. Talbert was called in multiple times during a previous investigation. He specialized in studying a substance called remnant, which looked like bubbling liquid mercury. The police department was never able to properly study it. Renelle finds the way to her father's house and Jake follows her. Her father is Dr. Talbert, however when Jake looked at a photo, she looked different there, so Renelle suddenly changes her appearance. Larson comes to Talbert's house too, and sees the Stitchwraith with a girl. All of a sudden, Larson begins to have another vision. He sees Renelle for who she truly is, Eleanor, an animatronic inhabited by a chaotic force that fed off of people's suffering. Larson draws out his gun to shoot her. Before he can, Renelle looks at him and smiles, as the visions overtake him and he collapses to the ground. He only manages to whisper her real name before losing consciousness. The Stitchwraith realized who she actually is and attacks her. Talbert thinks that the Stitchwraith is attacking his daughter. She makes a fake wound appear, and Talbert shoots him. Talbert tries to cure Renelle with remnant. That's exactly what Eleanor wanted. Larson found himself in Eleanor's memories. She was the one behind most of the Fazbear Frights stories, and sees her creating the plush trap chaser and other antagonists of the stories. Suddenly Eleanor attacks him but Larson kills her, so he wakes up and sees that what he did in the memory affected the real Eleanor. Larson sees her. She has black tendrils made of blood shot out of her mouth and wrapped around his face, forcing him unconscious and back into her memories. Larson uses the ball pit in the memories to go to different ones and tries to change them with attacking Eleanor. The Stitchwraith is fueled with rage and finally stands up again, strangles her and burns her. Larson and Jake defeat Eleanor. Jake goes away, finds the ball pit in the abandoned location, and gives the victims happy memories. While Talbert explains to Larson what remnant is, he gives Larson the heart-shaped pendant made from the real Renelle's remnant. We can finally assume that, when Fazbear Entertainment came back, they had a circuit board infected by Afton, and that's how Glitchtrap came to be. Now I will talk a bit about the tales from the Pizzaplex. Eleanor is indirectly the villain of the first story of the first book. While in the Frights she first appeared in the To Be Beautiful story, giving the protagonist a pendant to look beautiful while she was actually replacing the protagonist's limbs with trash and robotic parts until the pendant fell off and the protagonist died. In the tales the same thing happened, however the protagonist was using pieces of the pendant to cure her patients until there was nothing left, and became trash too. Eleanor might come back again, but only time will tell. The epilogues of the tales from the Pizzaplex explain Burntrap's origins. He's a mimic endoskeleton. He was a burnt rabbit endoskeleton who was brought to the burned down pizza place to help some workers since they wanted to turn it into a museum. However, the endoskeleton killed lots of them and everything was abandoned. The endoskeleton doesn't have a corpse, which may prove that Afton's corpse was, in fact, brought to a hospital. He does have a corpse in security breach though, and we will surely find out how he got it. This is the end of the video, but here's some extra stuff. The ball pit first appeared in the first story of the first Fazbear Frights book, Into the Pit, in which the protagonist enters the ball pit and finds himself in the memories of Afton's victims from 1985. He is then tormented by a creature that looks like Spring Bonnie. In another story, Hide and Seek, Eleanor tormented the protagonist with Shadow Bonnie, implying that she can create the shadows or even become them. Shadow Bonnie appeared as a monster in the protagonist's dreams, just like how Shadow Freddy appeared as Nightmare in Michael Afton's dreams. The Fazbear Frights books revealed that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was a pizzeria chain with lots of locations and each one of them had unique stuff. However, they all closed after the missing children incident in 1985. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.